here, and today we're going to be talking about 3 methods to sequence drums, and they are play them in live, they are use harmonic rhythm and variation, and the last one is MIDI loops. A lot of people don't use this one very much just because of the styles they're making, but if you're going to be sequencing something that sounds really realistic, it's really helpful to have MIDI recordings of actual drummers playing the rhythms, because they're going to do things that would just take a billion years to do if you were to sequence it out. So let's start with the one that I think most people use the most, and that is you use your rhythmic knowledge to create a rhythm, and then you embellish this rhythm. So every genre is going to have a rhythm associated with it, such as drum and bass. Drum and bass will have kicks typically here and snares here. So a kick on the first beat and on the and of 3, that's rhythm terminology. If you don't know this, you need to go watch the rhythm series on my YouTube channel. And then also a snare on beats 2 and 4. And so typically the tempos associated with drum and bass are very fast. Well, the tempos with drum and bass are fast. There's halftime drum and bass, but that's like a weird case. So we have this. And there you go. That's your typical drum and bass pattern. And then you can add a hat down on the 2s, and there you have it. So pretty simple stuff. And that's just from knowing the basic pattern. After this, we could now embellish it with better sounds, increase our emphasis on different parts of the beat. So that's another thing. In any beat, there's always going to be a fundamental thing in that beat that it drives the beat. So if you're playing a single instrument like a bongo or something, you're going to have one tone that's more important than the other, and you're going to hit it a particular way, and you're going to put emphasis around this thing. You're going to shape your beat around this tone. And most drum sets, it is the kick drum and the snare drum's relationship that lay down the core of the beat. Everything else serves to enhance this relationship. And there will be a most important beat, and we call that meter. And in this case, we are giving extreme emphasis to beat 1. And a 4/4 measure, there are 4 beats, with beat 1 getting the most important emphasis. The third beat is the halfway point, and that gets the next most important emphasis, typically in our 4/4 measure. So that's just typical Western theory. So that's what we're going to use here. So let's do something simple. Let's create a simple beat, such as at 95. And I'm just using arbitrary drums. You can choose different drums and enhance it later. But the point is, as you get more and more complicated, make sure that you just have your drums serving the main beat. And usually people have a feeling for this, but you can identify it by the meter you're in as well. So we're going to go ahead and just lay down something that's like do, ch, do. And then I'm going to do something simple. So we're going to do. So we have so it'll be boom, ch, da, boom, 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 ch, da, something like that. That was weird. Oh, I started it in the middle. That's why. Right, let's just go with something simple, nothing too crazy. And you can get crazier rhythms later, but the point of this method is we come up with a basic rhythm. And then we'll play it, and it'll be fine for a little bit, but we want to create interest. So I'm going to vary up these 2 and the last one. So I'm going to create subtle variations to make it more interesting. So on pattern 9, let's go ahead and change it up. So this is the second pattern. So let's go let's just add in a hat, just a simple hat. It will create that little variation that we need. See, so that's nice. And now we might want to change the fundamental relationship. Whoops, I already made it unique. The fundamental relationship here. So now we might go add in a kick there, and maybe put a kick there. That might be too much of a move, but we'll see how that works out. Oh, that's pretty cool. And now, this is already unique too. I already did this. And then on our last one, we need a little fill. So I'll go ahead and do something like that. And you may consider coming in here and shifting beats off the grid. I'm going to stay away from that right now, but you can create some really interesting moves. This typically happens as you're refining your song when you lay down stuff like that. So before, our rhythm would have just been this, right? Super boring. So this is our first method in action. And you can blow this up to however many parts you have. This is the principle though. So here we have, before it was this. So you see, it's just boring, like not as interesting. That could be important though. Maybe you have something really complicated going on and you need something that consistent going on. But then we have this, which is substantially more interesting. And you can, of course, do more or less extreme versions of this. So you see, that's like way more compelling, like a lot more compelling. Some people probably have mixed feelings about this thing here. Maybe switch these two around because the absence of sound I feel is a little more of a whoa moment. So it might serve better for a loop point because then it also gives you the chance to change up your beat musically, meaning when you loop around again and again, or well, ideally what you're going to do is you're going to do this, and if your loop's compelling enough, you can repeat it twice. If not, you can go ahead and you could just change the order of what you've created, or you can create entirely new subtle variations. And doing this is important for maintaining interest, but sometimes, again, it's not going to help your composition if your composition sounds freaking crazy complicated already. But that's that. I saw a common command once I found something I like that I'll do sometimes is, I believe it's Control G or Shift G. It's one of those. It'll merge all the patterns together, and then you can work from one large pattern, and I'll go into piano rolls and move notes subtly and add grace notes and ghost notes and things of that nature to make it more dynamic. So that's our first method. And it's probably the most common. The next method is playing stuff in. So I have open here an instance of machine. You're going to need to use your keyboard or something that will allow you to play a drum kit. Contact has lots of drum kits in their factory library underneath it's in factory library band. I can't remember. It's in the top folder though. And if you go, or urban, it's in the urban folder. Just dig in there. It's in there. So over here, I've got an instance of machine loaded up and I can play it with different pads. And what a lot of people do is they'll sequence their kick and snare first. So they'll be like, do, da, do, da. And then they'll play in their hat on top on a separate round. And then they'll slowly add elements. And what you can do is you can add in a whole bunch of elements on one loop, and then you can break it out and then slowly disperse the elements throughout a bunch of different loops to create something similar to what we just did. But now you have the added edge of things are slightly off the beat. It's a little more easy to accomplish the mood and feel that you want. And if you use a model drum kit, this can be an excellent way to get a very realistic sound. With hip hop, it's not necessarily what you're aiming for, but sometimes it is. Another thing that you can do is something I'm not going to touch here, but I do it a lot in Renoise, like a ton more in Renoise than I do in FL. And that is you open up a drum loop and you just chop it up and you play it as a drum kit. You just slice it up and away you go. I just don't typically do that here. Normally I'm grabbing samples. If I do that, I'm going to drag it on and chop it up on the grid without playing it live. So I'll play it live in Renoise, but here I will go in and I will do micro editing. A good example of this would be, there's the breakcore in the drum and bass series where we get pretty crazy with the micro editing in that one and taking drum loops and chopping them up and moving them every which way and doing really tiny adjustments. So that's like kind of advanced editing there. So, okay, cool. So that's our first two. One's played in, and if you don't have the means to do that, you should. You could even use your keyboard on your typing keyboard to do this. But if you have a dedicated MIDI controller, then you just got to open up a plug that supports that, and away you go. Or SliceX. SliceX is a good way to do that too. So I might open up SliceX and drop in something and then play it on your keyboard. And I have a whole series covering this thing too. Totally slipped my mind. And then let's do the last method. The last method is MIDI drum loops. And the reason why you'd want this is the easiest method. If you're going to make your own, which I encourage you do, if you have a friend who's got a MIDI drum kit and they're a drummer or you're a drummer and you can go at it and record a bunch, but you don't have to. If you own Contact, they have several modeled libraries. And the reason why this is so cool is they're modeled and they sound way more realistic. They were designed and treated very specifically to sound real. And so if we open up something, think of like, what is that thing called? Superior Drummer. Wow, this does not want to load. There it goes. So, for example, here's the drum kit, and I could go in and sequence my own drums, and it would take a while, and I would be using essentially the same thing I just did up here. So I do that sometimes too, but a lot of times when you're pulling out and you're trying to make something that has this sort of a vibe, they already have stuff already done. There's no point in going in and redoing all these rhythms. They're also useful for study. So what I can do is I can hit play to audition a groove. Like that's awesome. And then what I can do is I'll just go ahead and click this little crosshair and drag it onto my MIDI track, and boom, there's the MIDI. So now I can study the MIDI, and you see the notes all line up in different ways. See, like, ooh, that's a little bit off. Like, wow, why that one? Oh, look at that. Like, ooh. And you change the velocities, and you can go ahead and do some studies, and you can highlight notes and say, what instrument is this? And you'd be like, oh, so that's the snare. Here we have another flavor of a snare, and you can listen to the different hits and observe how they did the rhythms if you really want to get into constructing these from scratch by hand. But typically they're obtained by actually playing them in and doing a little bit of editing afterwards, similar to using hardware, only this is like the real deal. Of course, someone's going to be smart and say you could just record your own drums. That's totally true too. But we're talking about a different circumstance here where you either can't do that or you just don't want to do that. So you go ahead, grab your stuff in, and away you go. You toss in your drum loop. So another one that I like that is pretty cool is there is a MIDI grooves by Groove Monkey. This came with a library I bought, and I actually find them to be excellent. They're like super great. And they have them organized like so, and you can go ahead and just grab them, and you can mix and mash drum loops. And they follow a standard. So drum kits of this nature have a standard. They follow the MIDI standard, I believe. And so as long as you follow that standard with the way you set up your drum kit, you'll be good to go. You can go look it up. So yeah, I'm not going to say any more about that. But if I play this, let's go in here. So, and some of these have like speeds associated. Well, they all have speeds associated with them. So you want to make sure you get that right too. But anyways, don't be afraid to grab these. Don't let people tell you, oh, this isn't real producing, blah, blah, blah. And they just puke their opinion all over you. And it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm just trying to make some cool music and using the tools that have been presented to me in the most intuitive manner possible. I can go in, it depends on where you want to just emphasize your creativity. Is it going to be in extremely well sequenced drums, or is it going to be in very creative application of melody or harmony? Like, no one's going to sit in there and like derive everything from scratch. Like, that's insane. So don't do that. Just don't do it. So anyways, those are some methods I use that I find to be rather effective. I hope this helped you. If you have any questions about this, let me know. This is something when I'm sitting down, I'm going to write out some drums. If it's not immediately obvious what I'm going to do, this is the route I'll take. Oftentimes, I'll dabble around with live a lot, and then I'll sequence it in, or I'll play in live and I'll quantize it like super hard. So because a lot of times my live performance is not all that excellent, and I'll just move from there. I don't play live here just because it requires a low buffer, because I don't want to delay. Otherwise, it's really going to mess me up. And so it's difficult to do while recording. But again, if you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.